Hey there, it is Melanie back with another heavy metallurgy review. Today I'm going to be talking about the new Atrae Bilis album, Aumicide. This came out on April 19th on 20 Bucks Spin, and yes, I am doing another 20 Bucks Spin review. It was bound to happen. They're having a massive year. This is their second full-length album. Their first was also released on 20 Bucks Spin called Apex Apian. The band is out of Canada and they are a four-piece. This is a technical death metal band, but I want to just say, when I say technical death metal, I don't really mean in the way of making your brain feel like mush after you've listened to the album. Sometimes technical death metal can be a little bit too noodly, a little too much to digest while you're listening to it. This band definitely does it in a way that I prefer when it comes to technical death metal. So all in all, I'm a huge fan of how they play technical death metal as a whole. Conceptually, this album is about what the album artwork is. So the album artwork has gotten a little bit of criticism, and I've seen that, but I just want to clear the air here. This is not AI art. This is actually a sculpture that was done by Michael Perry and Angelo Weber at Grey House Studios. And this sculpture essentially is what the concept of this album is, where it is this specimen that is being tested on with experiments and then eventually gets released out into the world to live and learn. And yeah, it's essentially a very sci-fi concept if you think about it. So knowing that, I was a little less critical of the album cover, because I will be honest with you, I was not a huge fan of it when I first saw it. But knowing that there's a concept to this and that the album art goes along with it, that made it a little bit better for me personally. But again, I understand why people don't like it. But knowing that this is an actual statue, that's pretty cool. I would like to see that. Actually, I would like how big is it? Is it a big statue, or is it just a little statue that's in like a little glass case? If you're watching this and you're the artist, let me know. I would like to see the original statue of this. But anyway, just wanted to call out that, clear that up, because I've seen a lot of people talking about it since this album came out. So we have a 40-minute long album. Well, actually, 40 minutes and 10 seconds. So it goes 10 seconds over. 10 tracks. I think that's the sweet spot, the perfect amount in terms of an album. And every single album length is perfect. Not a single song goes over so long. There are 2 songs in here that are just over 6 minutes, but for the most part, the average track length is around 3 to 4 minutes, which honestly, if you're listening to a technical death metal band or album, that's the perfect track length in my opinion. So the track by track breakdown, I've been so excited to talk about this album. This has been one of the funnest listens that I've had this year. And there's been a lot of great albums that have come out this year, but I was really, really excited for this and to talk about it. So we start off with an instrumental track called Proto-Xenesis, and this band also makes me say things that are not within my vocabulary, so I'm probably going to pronounce so many things incorrectly, just calling that out there. But it is an instrumental track, very chunky, very heavy, and it really sets the tone for the atmosphere and the journey that you're about to go on for this album. It's only 2 minutes long, so it's an intro track that I generally don't care for when bands put just small intro instrumental tracks to start their album, but this one, it starts the album perfectly. Goes right into the second track, Hell Simulation, which is by far one of my favorite songs on this album. There's a lot of vocal variances in this track and across the whole entire album. There's not one style of vocal that this band does or the singer does. He goes from low, deep growls to incredibly low, deep growls, like so low that it made the speakers in my car sound like they were going to explode because it was just so deep. And it also has more of like the normal guttural growls that you would expect from this band from past songs that they've put out. But there's also this spacey atmosphere that you get throughout the whole entire album. This comes on the track, and it really sucked me in as soon as I heard this. There's also this guitar riff that reminds me of Big Hero 6 with Baymax, where he does the pounding. He's like, bah. that's essentially what the guitar slide sounds like a couple of times on this song. They do that, and that was essentially the first thing that it reminded me of. So it has these super technical guitar riffs that are not so technical that it makes your brain want to explode because you don't know what you're listening to, but it's definitely got like that spacey sound to it. Again, phenomenal song, and it's so crushingly heavy. The third track, Sultan and Stygia, is probably my favorite track. Just going to put that out there. I can listen to this song over and over again. And this song gave me a goosebump moment. And I got many of those while listening to this album. Again, there's vocal variances on the song. There's even some brutal death metal style vocals that I really, really enjoyed that gets littered throughout this whole entire album. And it just has the normal gutturals and then the higher sounding growls on here. This song does sound a bit like Revocation, and I realized saying that this was not planned. I did not plan to wear a Revocation shirt while doing this review today. As I was writing up my notes, I thought to myself, well, that really was not planned. But there are moments of the song where it sounds like the band Revocation. There's definitely possibly an influence here, and what I mean by that is there's a singing style in this song where it sounds like Dave from Revocation. It's got more of a cleaner sound to it when they sing. And then like there's also like this choral like sounding vocals as well that get added into us that really create, again, that spacey, almost sci-fi atmospheric sound to it. It has so many ebbs and flows to it. It goes from brutal, chunky, technical death metal to that more of that atmospheric technical death metal, and it has all of these different vocal variances. As a whole, not a boring song whatsoever. And then again, the song ends with those brutal death metal vocals that sounds like it's being played and screamed off into space. So it ends perfectly. I love that song. Next is another one of my favorite songs on the album. This was also, I believe, the single that they put out, Inward to Abraxas. This is a really chunky song. Man, the low end on this song, again, if you got a subwoofer, that thing is going to be exhausted after listening to this album. It's got that spacey atmosphere as well. It's so satisfying. Oh, it's done so well on this song. The guitars are the true standout and the uniqueness of this song. There's definitely this approach where they're playing the guitar leads and it sounds like a fan is being played in front of it. You know what I mean? When you're speaking into a fan, it's like blah, 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 blah. They do like that reverb sound with the guitars. It's very unique. It's hard to explain. When you hear the song, you know what I'm talking about. But that is my absolute favorite part of this song. It really just... It's a very unique approach. I've said that like 4 times. Unique is the word for this album. It's got a slower tempo with a higher pitch growls. It's a very, and I wrote in my notes, delicious song. I was really feeling it when I wrote these notes. Again, one of my favorite songs on the album. The next song, The Snuff, The Spirit Guides, again, another technical and heavy song, several different vocal variances as well. Phenomenal guitars on this, the harmonics on top of the chunky riffs. The drumming is also spectacular. I have not mentioned the drumming yet on this album, or the bass. The bass is just so chunky and heavy, and the drums are... He's got to be a squid with like 10 arms. My God. Again, phenomenal drumming. The next song, Aumicide, is an instrumental track. It is very atmospheric and heavy and dark, and I love this song. I think it's a nice little breather, gives you a little bit of a nice break from what you've just heard. It's a little over 3 minutes long, so doesn't stay for too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome on this album, but it's a nice little transitional song that leads right into Kingdom of Cortisol, which is, again, a heavy song. Guitars are phenomenal once again. Very chunky riffs on top of these lead guitars with these screams. Again, another one of the heavier songs on this album. The next song, A Monolith of Flame. This is probably my second favorite song on the album. This one gets stuck in my head. When they're screaming, a monolith of flame, you'll see what I mean. That gets stuck in your head. It then goes into that atmospheric sound with a slower pace, chunkier bass lines, chunkier guitar lines, the drums. It's just, again, subwoofers really trying hard to stay in one piece with that lower sound. And it gets so heavy with these lower growls and these amazing guitar riffs. Again, like I said, this was one of my favorite tracks on the album. Definitely got goosebumps for this. We're coming to the end here. We've got two more tracks. Through the Hologram Cervix. It's quite the title there. This is pretty much more of the straightforward technical death metal song on the album. Throughout the whole entire album, it's, technical death metal, and it is death metal, and you hear that, but they also incorporate those little atmospheric moments to it, a little bit more build-ups, a little bit more breakdowns. This one has probably less of that than the rest of the album. But again, it's a brutal and in-your-face song, and I think it goes well on here. No track is a filler, in my opinion. And then finally, we're to the end of the album, Excruciate, Incarnate. This is heavy, it's chunky, and dare I say, a little genty. A little bit of a genty guitar riffs on here. Don't kill the messenger. Whenever somebody says gent, they tend to like, ugh. No. It's not so genty. It's just some, very brief. But then it goes once again, into that sci-fi spacey atmosphere where you hear throughout this whole entire album. The drums are so good on this song. The vocal variances are there. No, there's not just one style of vocal variants or one style of vocals on this song. You've got the lower growls, the higher screams. The screams on this song almost sound a little bit more desperate, a little bit more emotional. This definitely is the more emotional song on the album, and I think the way it fades out, it ends up being the perfect album finisher. This album is a lot, but also it's not, if you try and understand what I'm saying here. For me, it wasn't a grower. It clicked right away. But I know that there are people who have heard this, have said it's a grower. And I totally understand where you're coming from with this. Technical death metal, as I said, can be something that I really do not enjoy because it can be so much to digest. This album is not that for me. But I would like to just call out, there are probably going to be moments on here where it gets pretty technical. And there's a lot of peaks on the songs where it goes from the brutal technical death metal sound to the more atmospheric, slower pace. That can be a little bit exhausting for some listeners, but for me, that was the one thing that I absolutely loved about this album. So final thoughts on this album. I am going to just go right out and say this is my favorite album to come out this year so far. I've listened to this probably more than anything that I've gotten in the mail recently, anything that I've reviewed so far this year. And I think that a lot of that has to do with just overall being such a huge fan of this band. I really loved their last release, and they do it in a way that meshes technical death metal, brutal death metal, and that more dissonant style of death metal all in one. So it touches on several different genres of metal that I love, and I feel like they just do it flawlessly. The guitars are perfect perfect 10 out of 10 for me. The drumming is perfect. The production sounds amazing. The vocal variances are so good. I love the chunky bass, the low end, just again, like I mentioned, it felt like the subwoofer was going to explode. The overall concept and the sci-fi space themes can be a little bit played out in regards to the death metal scene. They do it in a very cohesive, in a very organic way to where it's not too much. And it doesn't feel super like, well, I guess it's a little bit nerdy, but like pretentious. You don't feel pretentious while you're listening to this. Sometimes bands can get a little bit high on their own stuff, and this band does not feel that way. My one thing that I'm curious to know what's going to happen is what is next for this band. How will they continue on with their sound? Will they start to move into more of a different style of metal? Who knows? But for now, I'm enjoying the first 2 releases that they have. I absolutely love this album. It's a perfect album. I have no criticisms of it. I just can't. I tried to do a review where I could criticize at least something. The only criticism I had is that I wasn't a huge fan of the album artwork, and if that's all the bad things I have to say, then I think this band is doing something right. So that is all that I have for today. Thank you guys for all the support lately. Go ahead, comment below what you think, and I will see you guys in the next one.